Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Muncaster. Welcome to Meet the Birds. Now then, what you're about to see is going to be a conservation talk with the aid of lots of free-flying birds as opposed to a falconry demonstration. That's because here at Muncaster we also have the headquarters for an organisation known as the World Owl Trust. Now the World Owl Trust aims to work with all the world's endangered owls, both in the wild as well as in captivity. With the ones in the wild, what we're trying to do is to monitor vulnerable populations out there, species that may be declining, and if we can find out the root cause of their decline, then maybe we could do something about it so that the species can increase again. Or failing this, if there are species of owls that are facing imminent extinction out there, then the other option is to set up captive breeding programs with them, to try and establish the species in captivity as an insurance policy against that worst case scenario, should they end up going extinct in the wild. Now theoretically, if this were to happen, having a viable captive population means it gives us the option at some stage or other in the future, as and when the opportunity arises, of reintroducing the species back where they belong, into the wild. Well anyway, as I was saying, that's the theory, and that's basically the function of our collection here, as well as, of course, it being a showroom window for the work that we do here. But we're also a licensed wildlife rehabilitation centre, and I suppose the flying display, such as it is, can come loosely under that same heading, in that all the birds that you're about to see, they've got problems. Now, they've all got the one problem in common, and that is they're suffering from an identity crisis. They don't know they're birds, they think they're humans. And what's happened is that from a very early age, they've been hand-reared by human beings. They've had a human foster mum. So as they've grown up, they've come to identify with their human foster mum. That process is known as socialising and imprinting, but it means that when the bird's grown up, they're very confused, because if at this stage or other, if you reintroduce them back to their own kind, another bird, they can get very upset about it because they'll not recognise what the other bird is. They'll see the other bird as a potential threat, and they're more than likely just going to attack them. They're most certainly not going to want to breed with them. So from a breeding centre's point of view, we try and avoid imprinting if we can. But we do get birds like this handed into us from time to time, and we do need the odd imprint for the work that we do here. And if you're going to keep any imprints, then you've got to be able to give them the quality of life that they need. And the secret with an imprint is to give them human company, human interaction. So the Meet the Birds display here gives some of our birds exactly that opportunity, human interaction. So the Meet the Birds display is as much for their benefit as it is for ours. The fact that we get to fly one or two of them free means it makes our talk a little bit more interested, and the birds themselves get to act as ambassadors for their counterparts in the wild. That's the Meet the Birds in a nutshell, basically. So with that, we'll kick off with the first bird. And the first one to come out is a female common buzzard by the name of Mortimer. Don't ask. Anyway, Mortimer here, classic case, came to us via the RSPCA. She'd never seen the wild, born and bred in captivity, just had a bit of a bad start prior to coming here. Now she was badly handled, badly trained, badly socialised, and as a result of which she's a whole catalogue of bad habits. She's actually quite aggressive and unpredictable, and she's probably injured more members of staff here than any other bird we've got. She's even managed to mash and maul several World Owl Trust chief executives in front of large audiences. So she's no respecter of rank either. Not her fault, just how she was reared. Now she was still very young when she first came to us, in her first year of life, albeit fully grown, but she'd also been very badly malnourished. And this meant that her first supposedly working the flight feathers had actually grown in very weak and very brittle, and had mostly all snapped off. So she wasn't very well equipped for flying. Now it took about 3 years after we got her, of feeding her a balanced diet, before she managed to molt out all those useless feather stumps, before she grew in her first working set of flight feathers. So Mortimer here was about 4 years old before she got anything above 3 foot off the ground. So as a result of that, Mortimer is now scared of heights. Which is a bit of a drag really when you consider the fact that out in the wild, buzzards tend to soar on the thermals up between 1,000 and 2,000 feet, and they use their incredible eyesight to home in on anything that's edible to them. Are you listening to that, Mortimer? Just going to take my buzzard for a walk. Only at Muncaster. Now she's happy to do this, we're happy to let her. She looks a little bit like a malevolent chicken. Anyway, buzzards are what we call opportunists, which is a very kind way of saying that they're incredibly lazy and they like to eat dead things. Their favourite form of hunting is to sit on a lamppost next to an A-road or a motorway and to wait for rabbits to get run over. Squash bunnies don't run as fast as living ones, you see. So in places where they're even more common than they are here, such as South Wales, you'll quite literally find them next to the motorway there going into Cardiff, and they'll be sat on a lamppost waiting for rush hour to dish up breakfast. So they hold a very similar ecological niche in this country to vultures abroad. But that's kind of where the similarity ends, because vultures really are special carrion eaters. And as such, they're not really capable of making a kill for themselves. They're not a true raptor. Now, the word raptor comes from Latin, and it quite literally means an animal that hunts and kills with its feet. And in this present day and age, that means diurnal, daytime birds of prey, and nocturnal birds of prey, owls. Oh, here we go. Gone catching a vole or something like that. I'll be very surprised if she's got one, to be honest. Let's have a look and see, shall we? Mortimer. Oi. Over here. She's not read from the script today, you see. There we go. Okay, so where was I? Yes. Vultures. Yeah, so vultures, they're not true raptors. As I was saying, the word raptor comes from Latin, and it quite literally means an animal that hunts and kills with its feet. So in this present day and age, that means diurnal, daytime birds of prey, and nocturnal birds of prey, owls. Now vultures have big chicken feet, so they land on a carcass and they start eating. But buzzards here do have constricting talons. They're perfectly capable of making a kill for themselves, just prefer not to because it's hard work. But when they do run out of dead bodies to eat, one of their principal prey items then is the rabbit. And the fate of the rabbit and the buzzard are intertwined to such an extent that when myxomatosis was introduced in the 1950s to control the rabbit population, it also ended up having a knock-on effect with the buzzard. Now, rabbits being what rabbits are, they recovered relatively quickly. But it's taken buzzards 50 years to make up their numbers again, but to such an extent that they're now officially Britain's commonest diurnal bird of prey, even more common now than the kestrel, would you believe? But we thought, as seeing as we like our birds to do things which come natural to them, how about we kill a nice fluffy bunny rabbit for you today? What do you think? Yeah? I'd like to introduce you to our other member of the Meet the Birds team, our resident stunt bunny. Goes by the name of Legless. Can't think why. Anyway, had a good life, had an illustrious career as a stunt double for the Castor Watership Down. Come here to see out his retirement years. Now the idea being that I run like the cloppers, pulling Legless behind me, and Mortimer here, who as you can see is working himself up into a killing frenzy, is going to intercept. Are you ready? Here he goes. There we go, that was dynamic, wasn't it? That's the dummy bunny going in a straight line at 1.5 miles per day, shouting, "Kill me, kill me." Now, do you think a rabbit would behave like that in the wild? They're not, are they? They're going to do their utmost to try and avoid getting killed. What I'm going to do now for kill number 2 is I'm going to try and make the rabbit mimic a wild one, jinking about, taking evasive action, and getting up to burst of speed. And we'll see how Mortimer performs now for kill number 2, the naturalistic version. Okay, here goes. Don't blink. Oi, Mortimer. Well, she's not thick. She knows this is the hard one. As you can see, that's the rabbit behaving very naturalistic, walking up to its killer. And Mortimer studiously ignoring it, casting a hopeful glance about for worms instead. They don't run quite so fast, you see, worms do. But they can home in on a beetle or a worm from about 2,000 feet, would you believe? That gives you an idea about just how good their eyesight is. It's about as good as it gets during the day, on par with the golden eagles. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bait the bunny with a chicken leg. That usually gets her attention, and we'll see if she'll show you her hunting skills. Oh, nearly. Nearly. Sorry, just talk amongst yourselves. Oi. Oh, here she comes. There we go. Hunting buzzard. Angry buzzard. Dizzy buzzard. Shall we let her have it? Kill. Give her a round of applause. She's giving you all that. Right. Now then, can you picture the scene out in the fell where rabbits get up to bursts of speed of around 30 miles an hour? And there, furiously chasing them through the heather, is Mortimer, the common buzzard. Now, based on that performance, what do you reckon her chances of survival would be in the wild? Not very good, eh? She's had 19 years practice. Do you think she'd have had 19 years in the wild to learn how to hunt? She wouldn't have even had 19 weeks. Anyway, in order to make a kill, especially one as dynamic as that, you've got to learn timing and coordination. And the way we teach that here at the Owl Centre is we're doing a catch in mid-air. That's the first one this week. Yeah, she deserves that one. Okay. Mortimer's done everything that's required of her now. And now we come to the highlight of her day. T-bone white mouse. Geology cream cakes. Now that's Mortimer's cream cake, you see. Now what you've seen is quite amusing, but it does have a serious side to it. And that is that we never taught Mortimer to chase rabbits on foot. Something she came up with all by herself. And it's a fair indication that she'd been born in the wild. She would probably now no longer be alive. Because out there in the wild, you can't afford to be a slow learner like Mortimer. You've got to learn to survive after the manner of your kind as quickly as possible. And if you don't do that, you certainly won't survive long enough to breed. So out of every clutch of eggs that buzzards hatch, only the strongest and the cleverest survive long enough to breed for themselves. So only the strongest and the cleverest actually end up passing their genes onto the next generation. And that's what keeps the species strong, you see, and that's what's known as natural selection. So even if it could breed with Mortimer here, which we can't because she's an imprint, we wouldn't, because there's every chance that we might end up passing her thick gene onto her offspring, and we would be releasing into the wild buzzards which would have a tendency to chase rabbits on foot. And the rabbits would love us. Not that it matters whether Mortimer can breed or not, because she's perfectly happy doing the job that she does here. And in so doing, she more than earns her keep by being an ambassador for her counterparts in the wild. And in our off-view aviaries, we've got a disabled, ex-wild injured breeding pair of buzzards, birds which got injured due to no fault of their own. They're now disabled and can't go back into the wild. But other than that, they're happy enough and they're healthy enough. And most years they breed, and when they do, we release their able-bodied offspring into the wild around Muncaster. So if in your travels here today you do see any buzzards up and above, there's a very good chance that you might. There are lots of them about. There's every chance that the birds that you see flying free, that they would have been born and bred in our aviaries here. I hope that goes some way towards answering any criticisms you may have about seeing owls and birds of prey in aviaries. There's always a reason for everything that we do. Okay, moving on now. I want to introduce you now to a very handsome, white-breasted British barn owl. I stress the white-breasted and the British, that's because in Europe around 95% of the population of white-breasted barn owls actually lives in the UK. The other 5% lives in Western France, in Normandy and Brittany, and in the rest of Europe you'll find a distinctly different subspecies that's much darker all round. It's known as a dark-breasted barn owl. Now the barn owl's got a global distribution. It's the most widely distributed type of owl in the world, making them the most successful. But the main distribution and origin is actually the tropics and the subtropics. That's the kind of climate zone that barn owls come from. It's the kind of climate zone they've evolved to live in. It just so happens that since the last ice age, since the world's warmed up a bit, they've managed to radiate away from the tropics. And the British Isles is the furthest from the tropics that barn owls get anywhere in the world. And in terms of climate, it's right on the edge of what they can endure. Because the British barn owl, although native to Britain, is actually no better adapted to our cold climate than is a tropical barn owl from Central Africa. So it does cause them one or two problems, I have to say. Different parts of the world, you'll find they're all different races, all of them darker than the one that lives in Britain. So the white-breasted British barn owl is probably the most beautiful one of the lot, and it lives here in the UK. It makes them rather special, really. What I want you to do next is when he flies, have a look at his wings. You'll see that his wingspan is very long. He's got very long, elongated wings. From that you can tell that he's an open country bird. By open country, I mean that kind of countryside, what you see behind me there. Species-rich, rough grassland. What in this country would be classed as meadowland. And what we're looking for in the long grass and the meadows are small furry animals. He's a small furry animal specialist. He doesn't eat beetles and worms. And the one small furry animal that he relies upon above all others is something that's known as a short-tailed vole. Now the short-tailed vole is a mouse-sized rodent. It's the most numerous small furry animal to live in long grass. And the reason why it lives in long grass is because it eats long juicy grass stems. So there's a food chain for you, you see. Long juicy grass stems equals food for voles, voles equals food for barn owls. Now the barn owl relies on the short-tailed vole for around 85% of its diet. So So if you were to take the short-tailed vole out of the equation, very soon you're going to end up with no barn owls whatsoever. And therein lies our problem, in that since the Second World War we've lost 97% of all our ancient hay meadows, the kind of habitat that supports voles and which in turn supports barn owls. Haymaking was the traditional way in which farmers would gather fodder to feed their animals in winter. It would take place once a year, usually mid to late July, at a time when voles and barn owls would have had their breeding cycle. And the machinery that was used was such that there'd be a turning circle around the edge of the field that didn't get mowed, which would leave a convenient wildlife margin where voles could live, where barn owls could hunt in the off-season. So it was a happy compromise. Well, nowadays haymaking has been replaced by silaging. Silage being fast-growing Italian and perennial ryegrass. These grass species were introduced from the Mediterranean around 40 years ago, and they grow that fast, especially after a coating of slurry, that in these parts, especially after a warm spring like we've just had, you can get up to 3 cuts in one growing season as opposed to 1 cut of hay. So that's like a cut every 2 months. So you can see why it makes sense for farmers to use this. It's also more nutritious for their animals in winter. But the side effect of it is this: short grass. There's nothing on here of any interest to voles, barn owls, or even kestrels. Kestrels hunt this same environment. They come out and do the day shift to the barn owls' night shift, so they're never the twain shall meet. So for many a year, one of the last places where you'd find a permanent meadow-type habitat would be next to way roads and motorways. It's where all the lovely wildflowers are starting to come out now, like your oxeye daisies. And that's where you'll tend to see many of your kestrel sightings. Now, kestrels are small falcons, they're dynamic flyers, they fly well up above the traffic, and they use their eyesight to hunt. Barn owls are completely different. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little fashion parade with Fidget down the front here, and what I would like you to do is to take a good look at his face. And you'll see that he has what appears to be quite a large head. Well, his head in relation to his body size isn't really any bigger than that of the kestrel, but what he has is a big fan of feathers around his face, a bit like the white petals on a daisy. Gives him the appearance of a large head. Well, that fan of feathers, we call it a facial disc, and it's a feather satellite dish for his hearing, so it has the exact same function as our outer ear. Now, this guy's hearing is that good, that acute, that he can, with pinpoint accuracy, just by hearing alone, locate and then kill his prey. So the way in which he tends to hunt, he tends to fly low, much the kind of height that you see him at now. He flies, slow, he doesn't fly fast, he doesn't have to, because he flies silently. He's got stealth on his side, and it means that he can hear better what's going on around him. Now that's a very good way, a very effective way of locating small mammals in long grass in a hay meadow. And let's face it, long grass does tend to hide a lot more than it reveals, so it really does give the barn owl an edge. But unfortunately, it's not that good if you're hunting next to a busy roadside. Not only have you got the noise pollution from the traffic, but when you're flying that low next to a busy roadside, and you've got that big long wingspan, which is coupled to a very light body weight, by the way, they're nothing more than a feather duster with wings. As soon as there's a big gust of wind comes up, you get blown about like a dry leaf and you lose all control. So imagine what might happen to a low-flying barn owl next to a busy roadside that suddenly gets hit by the slipstream from a juggernaut. Not that unlikely a scenario, really, is it? And because of this, up to half the wild breeding population of barn owls gets killed every year by traffic in this country. That's quite apart from all the other sad statistics caused by the fact that we've gotten rid of so much of their primary habitat in the first place, and hence their food supply. And also the fact that our ever increasingly erratic climate is causing them a whole heap of problems. This last winter wouldn't have been very good for them because they can't come out when it rains because they have no weatherproofing in their feathers. And unlike a tawny owl or a kestrel, they don't really carry body fat reserves either. So if the weather goes on and it's bad for too long, barn owls are literally starving to death all up and down the country. So there's already a very, very high mortality rate with barn owls in this country, without us adding to that by killing them in traffic. Now, they've been here every bit as long as the tawny owl has, and they do belong here, and they've had a very effective survival strategy up until we started messing with their environment, and that is that there's no other type of owl or bird of prey can breed as quickly as a barn owl. They have known them actually lay the first egg in January and the last egg in December, and they can lay up to 12 eggs in a clutch when conditions are right. But unfortunately, conditions haven't been right for quite some time, not since the Second World War and the advent of modern farming methods. So due to a combination of everything that I've told you about, the barn owl declined very rapidly until around 30 years ago they reached such a low level that we, the conservation world, the World Owl Trust included, we did captive breeding and release schemes. We managed to reintroduce captive bred barn owls into areas where there was good habitat. And this was combined with DEFRA setting up some beneficial agri-environmental schemes, one of which was to subsidise farmers to reseed some of their set-aside land with traditional meadow grasses and wildflowers and then manage them as meadows. And this pilot scheme was known as the Countryside Stewardship Scheme. And in places where there was a big uptake in this, in places such as East Anglia, the barn owls managed to make a regional recovery again. So barn owl numbers are better now than they were even 10 years ago. They're looking fairly healthy, but they're not quite at the level where we would want them to be to guarantee their long-term survival in this country. But that's basically the longest battle in owl conservation. And what I want to introduce you to now is the biggest success story, also the biggest type of owl as well. And it's coming out now, and I would like to introduce you to Chocolate, the European eagle owl. And this is quite literally, like I say, the biggest success story in owl conservation. And the European eagle owl is the largest kind of owl in the world today. And that's why we call them eagle owls, you see. They're not actually related to eagles in any way, shape or form. They're just comparable to them in size and power. They're the nocturnal equivalents, go for the same kind of prey species as well. But they've got a very spectacular story to tell, and the story of the European eagle owl is that in the late 1950s and the early 1960s they were critically endangered with extinction. There was a population survey done. It was found that in mainland Europe they were virtually extinct. The only significant population was left in Sweden, around 60 to 70 breeding pairs. And the reason for this massive decline was the same old story. It was habitat loss. Now this bird's habitat are the big northern pine forests of Europe, places like the Black Forest in Germany, northwards into places like Finland, Sweden and Norway. Now these forests had been destroyed by industrial pollution causing acid rain. Well, since those days, the industries of Britain and Europe have done an awful lot to clean up their emissions act, because we're now by law no longer allowed to needlessly pollute the environment. And this has meant that all those nations most badly affected could set about replanting their forests. Now this wasn't done for altruistic reasons, I have to say. It was done for the wood pulp industry, for your milk cartons and your newspapers. But even so, those industries now have to function more sustainably, and what that means is that for every forest that's felled, another one has to be planted to replace them with. So that means that in Europe at least, theoretically, there's always X amount of habitat available for wildlife. Well, that gave us, the conservation world, the unique opportunity to reintroduce captive red eagle owls back into the wild. Now we had to devise methods to make sure that this could be done successfully, because the thing about eagle owls, or owls in general basically, is that they get very set in their ways, and they're only really capable and open to learning new skills when they're very young. So to have any chance of success in reintroducing them, you've got to put them out there when they're very young. So we tend to put them out there when they're about 6 weeks of age. At the age of 6 weeks, they're not yet capable of flying, but they are by now capable of feeding themselves, which means that you can put them in an aviary on the release site where you want them to live, and you can throw in something like a rabbit carcass once a day and they'll take care of themselves. You can then leave them to physically mature for another 5 or 6 weeks or so, until by the time they're 12 weeks of old, they really are fully grown and fully feathered. It really is as quick as that. With owls and birds in general, they can't afford a long dependency on their parents. And then they're basically looking just like Chocolate here, and then they're physically equipped to deal with the outside world. And you can just take the aviary roof off and let them go. Oh, she's seen the dog, I think. Yeah. It's all right, she gets your dog, we'll give it you back as a parrot 8 hours from now. They can take foxes and badgers out in the wild, you see. But anyway, so yeah, you take the aviary roof off, let them go, but because they've lived half their life in that aviary, as far as they're concerned, this is their home, and it gives you a convenient place to supplementary feed them from for another 2 or 3 months after this initial release. And this will hopefully nursemaid them through that transitionary phase where through trial and error they teach themselves how to hunt. And hopefully at the end of this period you've then got a fully independent wild eagle owl. Now this is known as a soft release method, and it's proved to be very successful, because after an initial 1,000 releases in Germany and Sweden, that found the population has now expanded into other newly created habitat, and the latest surveys are suggesting that there are just under 10,000 breeding pairs of them in the whole of Europe. And that's largely down to having been reintroduced from captive bred stock, such as what we have at the Owl Centre here. And that's the biggest success story in owl conservation, and that's the best story I can tell you to help illustrate to you the concept of what this collection here actually represents. And what we've done for the European eagle owl is what we'd like to be able to do for every other owl species that needs our help. And our biggest ambition being that we can tear all the aviaries down and have nothing whatsoever to show to you. But the day that we can do that is the day that we can claim to have sorted out whatever problems it is that's facing owls out in the wild. And that's just it, you see. It's not just about the owls themselves. The owls are carnivores, predators, meat eaters. It means that the owls' dinners usually come conveniently wrapped in fur, running around on 4 legs. Which means that the owls' dinners have to find their dinners as well. It's called a food chain, you see. It's got to be intact from the bottom all the way up to the top before you can support predators such as owls. So you've got to look after that bigger picture to have owls there in the first place. And that bigger picture, there's a very fancy buzzword for that, and that's biodiversity. Biodiversity is just a fancy buzzword for everything that's out there that's alive, whether it's a blade of grass or a blue whale, but you need to look after that biodiversity before you can have owls. Just backtracking to the barn owl, for instance, something a little bit nearer to home. If you're looking after barn owls and barn owl ecology, that which keeps a barn owl alive in the wild, you're not just looking after barn owls, but you're looking after wildflowers, butterflies, bumblebees, small mammals, skylarks, corncrakes. There's a whole list of species that are actually declining in the UK at the moment that benefit from barn owl conservation. And that, as a rule of thumb, applies to every other owl species out there. But anyway, the European eagle owl here is the biggest success story in owl conservation, and if we hadn't have bred that bird in captivity, it may very well by now have been nothing more than a sad, dusty, stuffed museum relic. And I hope you'll agree with me, it's much nicer to see one alive and in the flesh than it is to just see one stuffed and mounted in a museum. At least this way, you get to see how they move. You even get to hear some of the noises they make. She's Mr. Q again. Never mind. Oh, there we go, better late than never. But there we go, you see, that's the biggest success story in owl conservation. Now, if you like what you've seen and heard here today, and you wish to help us at the World Owl Trust, which I hope you do, there's a few ways in which you can do that. The World Owl Trust is a charity, gets no funding from government whatsoever. A few ways in which you can help us here today. There's a bucket on the table. You're very welcome on the way past to throw in a donation in there, that will help. And whilst you're going past, in there's also information packs. You can pick one of them up, they're not going to cost you a penny. But in that information pack, there's information about individual adoption schemes. Through individual adoption schemes, we can raise valuable funds for conservation. And the glossy form on the outside is a membership form, because the World Owl Trust is a membership organisation, a bit like the RSPB, and the more members they get, the better the World Owl Trust is able to do its job. So pick one of them up, fill one of them in if you like. Now, okay, we've got one last thing to offer to you now, and that's if there's anybody here interested in having their photo taken whilst holding Fidget the barn owl on a glove like this. It will cost you £3.50p, and we will take a digital picture and give you a glossy digital printout to take away with you there and then while you wait. Now, if you're interested in having that done, you see where the table and the bag are. If you just form an orderly queue over that side of the ropes, and we'll come and sort you out as soon as possible. And if you are interested in having that done, if you could have the exact change, that would be absolutely brilliant, because there was one day last week everybody just insisted on paying with £20 notes, and we don't have enough change to deal with that, if you see what I mean. But if you're interested in having that done, just form an orderly queue over that side of the ropes, and we'll be with you in about half a minute as soon as we're organised. Other than that, thank you very much for visiting. Thank you for listening. Thank you.